1968, the year the U.S. lost the war in Vietnam. While this may at first seem to be an overly bold claim or perhaps even a hasty generalization, 1968 does in fact mark the year that was the beginning of the end for the United States, in particular the beginning of the end for the battle of ideas that had been waged between the United States and North Vietnamese forces throughout the Vietnam War. In 1968, with the advent of the Tet Offensive and other such battles, Americans got a better sense for what was actually going on in Vietnam, and public opinion plummeted. In Tobias Wolff's memoir, In Pharaoh's Army, Wolff talks about his involvement with counterattacks during the Tet Offensive, and in his chapter, The Lesson, Wolff talks about a turning point in his own perspective in theater on the war in Vietnam. From taking a look at the broader context of American opinion in 1968, and also analyzing Wolff's words in this specific chapter, we can get a better sense for public opinion and in-theater opinion of the soldiers during the Vietnam War, which is also applicable to the wars that we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past decade. But first, to get a broader sense of what was going on in the United States early in 1968. Before the Tet Offensive began at the end of January of that year, U.S. opinion of the war was generally high. There were sectors of American society that believed the war was wrong, that we weren't doing the right thing, but on the whole, Americans thought that the war would be over quickly, that we could still gain a quick victory in Vietnam. However, once the Tet Offensive began in late January of that year, coinciding with the Vietnamese New Year of Tet, Americans suddenly began to realize that what they were being told by politicians and higher-up military officials was maybe not so true, that the communists were weaker than ever. It didn't all make sense. Additionally, after the Tet Offensive, General Westmoreland ordered an additional 200,000 troops to Vietnam, which did little to instill greater confidence in the American public. Additionally, from news reports, both printed and broadcast, Americans got a much different sense of what was going on in Vietnam. They saw the atrocities that American soldiers were committing and saw the horrors of war firsthand. Traditionally moderate news anchors such as Walter Cronkite began to change their tone in their broadcasts, and even though they had originally been supportive of the war behind closed doors themselves, began to offer a different perspective. In a February broadcast in 1968, Walter Cronkite said, "To say that we are closer to victory today is to believe, in the face of the evidence, the optimists who have been wrong in the past." This further decreased American public opinion of the war and really led to the changing of ideas that would mark the American loss of the war. In Wolff's memoir, In Pharaoh's Army, in the chapter The Lesson, Wolff talks about his involvement with counterattacks in the Tet Offensive. Wolff was tasked with protecting the South Vietnamese town of My Tho, and along with South Vietnamese forces, Wolff was responsible for ordering artillery strikes against Viet Cong forces that had infiltrated the city. Wolff talks about his experience, and in the aftermath of the artillery attacks, he walks through the town and notices that there are innocent civilian men, women, and children lining the streets, killed from the artillery attacks that he ordered. In conclusion, Wolff realizes that the North Vietnamese knew all along what would happen. They knew that by infiltrating the cities and starting the Tet Offensive, they could show the South Vietnamese that the Americans didn't care. When it came to the heat of battle, they would have no regard for who was enemy and who was friend, and they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. In his closing paragraph, Wolff writes, "The North Vietnamese knew that we would kill every last one of them to save our own skins. To believe otherwise was self-deception. They taught that lesson to the people and also to us. At least they taught it to me." Wolff's words mirror those of Walter Cronkite and shows how attitudes in theater in 1968 started to change as a result of those back home as well. From Wolff's lessons, we can learn a lot about what it will mean to us to be future officers in the United States military, especially when it comes to fighting battles of ideas, battles for hearts and minds, like what we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past decade. It becomes very difficult to win the hearts and the minds of the people if you end up killing innocent civilians in the process. While they may be your friends initially, it becomes easy for them to accept the ideas of the enemy and to look upon them as their friends and their protectors. By taking a look at Wolff's words, the broader context of public opinion in 1968 in regards to the Vietnam War, and how these ideas play out today, we can get a better sense for what it means to be military officers and what we might have to deal with in the future, especially when fighting protracted conflicts against unconventional forces in the battle for hearts and minds. Thank you.